Hey guys, welcome back to Tabletop Glory. My name is Graham Johnson, and today we're going to be talking about burnout and why it can be a bit of a hazard and how you can avoid it. Now, burnout comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes and can even be as mild as simply just not having the motivation. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, enough of my jabbering, let's run the intro, and then let's talk about some of the things we can do to eliminate that and get ourselves back on track. So recently I had an awesome opportunity to work on a rather large Star Wars commission. In fact, so large that when I take a picture of all of the miniatures together, I can't seem to get a decent photo. Something's always either out of focus and looks bad, or is in focus and is too sharp, and therefore everything else is out of focus. It's just a very large commission. And so as a result, I thought the best way to handle that would be to take a bunch of little videos of them all on my little rotating display stand and get some up close shots of some of the models. So we're going to show that off today during the video while I kind of talk about some of the things that I use to avoid burnout and to keep my motivation up during a large project like that. Now, first and foremost, it's important to recognize that burnout is absolutely okay, and if you're not under a deadline like a content creator is, or someone who is doing this as a commission, there's nothing wrong in taking a break from what you're working on. If you're really experiencing burnout or loss of motivation, put it down. Go read a book, go watch a movie, play a video game, take a nap. You can always come back to it later. Now, if you're someone who is similarly to me, or once you take that break you have a hard time coming back to it, one of the tricks that you can do is simply put paint on your brush. Put paint on your brush and paint at least one thing, whether it's a backpack, a weapon, whatever the case is. And I guarantee that by the time you're done painting that one small object, you'll find the motivation to keep going to at least finish that one miniature. And even if you don't finish anything else in your to-do list that day, at least you finished one miniature. Now, what if you've got a big project and you just need to get yourself through it? You're not necessarily worried about burning out, or perhaps maybe you're looking for something that will at least help keep the motivation going into the next project. Well, that's where I like to put a preferred model, something that I think is going to be a lot of fun to paint, and I set it aside. And so when I start burning out, that's when I start working on that preferred model. It's kind of like a reward for forcing yourself through the models that you maybe would have put a little less effort into had you put them off and done them later. I notice a lot of the times when I start to burn out, I don't do as good a job as what I was doing in the beginning. And so by having that preferred model, that reward that I set aside for myself, something to do that I'm going to enjoy, I find that even though I'm a little burnt out, I end up putting that extra effort in on the model that I was wanting to do, the model that I'm looking forward to working on. And as a result, everything comes out looking the same. Also, by powering my way through that model and getting that one done, especially one that I enjoy, I get that little boost of serotonin from finishing a project, and then that gets me all excited to work on the rest of the project. Now, depending on how large the project is, you may need to set more than one model aside to do that, and that's okay. Also, feel free to take as many breaks as you need to. There's nothing that says taking a break is going to make you less of a hobbyist or anything weird like that, so enjoy the time you have and enjoy the process. Now, along the same lines of giving yourself a bit of a reward, there are going to be days where you just have no motivation, whether you've just come home from work or maybe you woke up on your day off and you're just looking at your pile of shame or your current commission or whatever your current project is on your desk, and you're just thinking, man, I really don't want to do that. And even your reward model, you want to do it, but you just can't get the motivation to put paint to brush. We kind of want to go back to what I talked about at the beginning. Just put some paint on your brush. However, in this case, we want to go ahead and grab what I call a reserve model. Now, this is a term that I use. Maybe other artists use it differently. But in the case of this commission, a reserve model for me is something like the Stormtroopers. The Stormtroopers are a really easy model to knock out. And yeah, there's some fiddly detail stuff, but at the end of the day, there's so little of that on that miniature. I can basically slap these things together basically blindfolded. A Stormtrooper's all white, a Death Trooper's all black. it's really easy to just kind of knock these miniatures out and get that serotonin going, and that's enough to usually get me going in the right direction and to make me want to finish whatever my current project is, or at the very least finish the miniatures that I started the night before. And if I can knock out 1 or 2 models every single day while suffering from burnout, that's a steady crawl forward to get that project done. Now again, these are things that work for me, and they may not necessarily work for you, but I hope that they work for you, and I hope that they help you to get your project done. Now we're going to talk about some things that we can do even when these things don't work. There are those days where you just don't want to do anything, and that's okay. There's some solutions to that. To quote one of my favorite podcasts, we've talked about a lot of great ways to slay the gray, but those ways of slaying are hobby burnout and to burn our way through large projects really only apply to either large collections or large projects, whether it be a box set or whatever the case may be. But what about people with small collections, or someone who just plays Kill Team and maybe only has a couple of boxes of miniatures? Or maybe you're a D&D player and you just have a couple of player character models, and you don't really have those models that you could set aside to be your inspiration model, and you're just kind of burnt out. Well, there's a couple of really great ways that we can conquer that hobby burnout, one of which is just touching up old models. And this actually comes way of Eon's Battle. In his video, he talks about how he conquers his own hobby burnout, and I think one of the best tips that he gives is looking at some of your old models that you've finished and looking at some that maybe you're not quite happy with, or you'd like to take the details a little bit further. Because at the end of the day, you're just adding a few little details to an already finished model. It's not like you're trying to get it to a specific point, you're just trying to add a little splash of flavor to them and to kind of get that serotonin going again and get yourself back in the mood. This is a really, really great tip for people who have a small collection of miniatures, or perhaps have a rather small pile of opportunity, whether it be by personal choice or because of monetary means or whatever the case may be. Now, if you have a rather small collection, and perhaps you're newer to miniature painting, or perhaps your skill has not evolved beyond a point where you feel like touching up your miniatures would make much of a difference, there are a few other ways, and this is what I used to do back when I first got into the hobby, when I was suffering from hobby burnout, because it's quite easy when you're first getting started to only paint for 15-20 minutes and then already feel kind of overwhelmed. A really great way for me was simply going on social media and looking at other people's projects, whether it be going on YouTube and watching videos of people working on similar armies to myself or similar miniatures to myself, or going on Instagram, or going on Pinterest is a really great website. If you don't even know what kind of color scheme you want, Pinterest is a wonderful place to go to simply type in the name of the miniature you're painting and then a rough idea of colors you want to paint with. So if you like purple and you're painting a ninja, type in male or female purple ninja and see what comes up, because there are going to be hundreds of results that come back, and you might find a lot of really cool stuff that can inspire you in a way that you didn't think was possible. And now you've kind of got this general idea of where you want to end up with. Even if your skill level isn't at a point where you can match what you're looking at, it's a really great way to kind of get yourself pointed in the right direction and get the creative juices flowing again and get you back on track. There's a lot of really excellent hobby channels out there, regardless of what you paint miniatures for, whether it's model trains or D&D or Warhammer. There's a lot of really great stuff out there, whether it's like Mel the Terrain Tutor, Miniac, you name it. There's a ton of really great people out there for all different spokes for different folks. One of the best channels out there, in my opinion, when it comes to their ability to not get bogged down with hobby burnout, I think, is probably Goobertown Hobbies. The fact that that man has done Goobertown Roulette, anytime he's experiencing burnout or a lack of motivation, I imagine, is every time we get one of his Goobertown Roulette videos. And it is such an excellent way of doing things. And I feel like if your collection is large enough and you have miniatures that you don't have a planned paint scheme for, and you have miniatures that you don't mind dividing up, it's a really great way to kind of get out of that hobby funk and to get motivated again. Now, if you're not familiar with Goobertown Hobbies and you're not familiar with Goobertown Roulette, Essentially what he's done is he's taken a bunch of brown sandwich bags and put individual miniatures into every bag, and then he's kind of jumbled them up at random, and he pulls one out at random, and then he rolls dice to determine its paint scheme and the thematic overall tones of that miniature. And sometimes he builds tiny little dioramas, and sometimes he just paints an individual miniature. And as a result of that, he paints in all different kinds of paint schemes that he would never do, and styles that he would never do, because that's not his traditional style. But it gives him a way to stretch those creative juices to their limit and really experiment around and grow a lot as a creator. So if your collection is a type of collection that allows you to do that, you may want to do that. I've been very tempted to do that with a lot of my D&D miniatures, as well as a handful of the Warhammer stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of my Warhammer collection I actually have plans for, and I want them to be a part of specific armies. So I'm not really able to do that with the bulk of my collection, which is the only reason you haven't seen anything like that yet on my channel. But maybe someday soon. It's important to remember that we as humans are creatures of habit, and as a result of that, oftentimes if we have allowed ourselves to get in a rut where every time we either have a lack of motivation or we have hobby burnout, we're going to fall back into those same tropes. And if those tropes are something that results in us not getting work done, or at least not getting our hobby done, those can be a problem, especially for someone like myself who's a content creator, or someone who's doing commission work. We can kind of end up in this situation where we're constantly pushing our workload ahead of us until it turns into this monumental monster that feels very overwhelming. And so if we want to put ourselves in this position where we can slay the gray, or at the very least paint boldly, then we need to develop these habits where every time we experience our hobby burnout, or every time we experience a lack of motivation, then we can continue forward and continue to make those strives, so that when inspiration hits us, we're ready to take advantage of it. Inspiration, as we all know, is not something that can just be found or mined or collected or bought or purchased. It comes when it comes, and we can inspire ourselves through looking at other people's work or watching a movie or things like that, but inspiration is not always going to hit in the same way twice. And by falling back into old habits and kind of pushing our workload ahead of us and then doing a little bit as we come to it, we put ourselves in this position where when inspiration hits, we can't always take advantage of it. So it's important to set in motion something that works for us. So what I've talked about in today's video is what works for me, and it may not work for you. And I highly encourage you that if you like today's video, but you're not sure if my methods are going to work for you, to go out and look at other people's methods. There's a lot of great YouTubers out here who are posting how they deal with hobby burnout and how they deal with a lack of motivation. And there's also a lot of great hobby content people, and by that I mean people like you, who are in Discords and on social media, who post pictures of their work. And you can always reach out to most of them. I have found that most people in this hobby are willing to chit chat. And if you say, hey, I saw your work, I think it's really wonderful, would you like to talk about it for a bit? That can also be a really great way to put yourself into that hobby spirit and to kind of get your creative flow back underneath you, simply by talking to somebody else about their creative flow. So in any case, I hope today's video helped you guys out a lot, and I hope that you can take what we talked about and continue forward and help get your pile of shame done, or your pile of opportunities started. Now, I would like to go ahead and before we end today's video, I want to address the miniatures that we have seen on screen today. These are a commission. They're a large Star Wars commission for Star Wars Imperial Assault. It is the entire, I think, Season 1 collection. I think there's more than just what we saw on screen today. Please keep in mind that I have multiple commission levels. If you've been on this channel any length of time, you have seen all different levels of my work, from commissions to my own personal projects to even display and diorama pieces. So please, if this is your first time watching this channel, don't think that what we saw today is the extent of what I do. This is just what the customer paid for and what they were happy with, and they wanted to do the basing themselves, so this is what they got. And I wanted to take an opportunity to use this project to talk about hobby burnout because it is real and I experienced it at the end of this project, and I wanted to share with you guys my process to push forward. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching. May your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Until next time.